the dualism of the real and the ideal. Philosophically, it has always been a very important issue whether the ideal and the real, the material and the spiritual, the physical and the mental are to be regarded as the mutually interdependent or disparate terms which exclude each other. We have seen that the growth of the self implies that the individual should evolve the inner richness of his being. This cannot be brought by withdrawing from the world of matter into the seclusion of one's own contemplative activity, but by establishing numerous and fruitful contacts with the facts and forces of his environment. Through this stimulating contact, he has sharpened his intellect, built up a great civilization, and opened up the possibilities of a still greater triumphs. खोल आँख ज़मीन देख फलक देख फ़ज़ा देख मशरिक़ से उभरते हुए सूरज को ज़रा देख इस जलवाए बेपर्दा को पर्दों में छुपा देख अय्याम जुदाई के सितम देख जफ़ा देख बेताब ना हो मार काए बेमुरजा देख हैं तेरे तसर्रुफ़ में ये बादल ये घटाएं ये गुंबद अफलाक ये खामोश फ़ज़ाएं ये कोह ये सहरा ये समंदर ये हवाएं थी पेश नज़र कल तो फरिश्तों की अदाएं आईना अय्याम में आज अपनी अदा देख समझेगा ज़माना तेरी आँखों के इशारे देखेंगे तुझे दूर से गुर्दों के सितारे नापैद तेरे बहरे तख़य्युल के किनारे पहुँचेंगे फलक तक तेरी आहों के शरारे तामीर खुदी कर असरे आहे रसा देख खुर्शीद जहाँ ताब की जू तेरे शरर में आबाद है एक ताज़ा जहाँ तेरे हुनर में जश्ते नहीं बख्शे हुए फिरदौस नज़र में जन्नत तेरी पिन्हा है तेरे खून जिगर में ऐ पैकरे गिल कोशिश पैहम की जजा देख नालंदा तेरे ऊत का हर तार अज़ल से तू जिनसे मोहब्बत का ख़रीदार अज़ल से तू पीरे सनम खाना असरार अज़ल से मेहनत कशो खून रेज़ व कम आज़ार अज़ल से ऐ राक़िब तक़दीर जहाँ तेरी रज़ा देख Open thy eyes, look at the earth and the sky, look at the sun rising gloriously in the east. Look at this unveiled glory hidden behind veils. Suffer the pain and torture of separation. Iqbal has, however, been criticized from another point of view. In his insistence on the value of ideal and the spiritual, he is accused of soaring so high as to lose all contact with the everyday world of matter in which ordinary people have their being. Thus, in Bale Jibreel, he makes a clear distinction between the world of mind, man ki dunya, and the world of body, tan ki dunya. Man ki dunya, soz o masti, jazb o shaukh, tan ki dunya, sood o sauda, makr o fan. मन की दौलत हाथ आती है तो फिर जाती नहीं तन की दौलत छाँव है आता है धन जाता है धन मन की दुनिया मैंने ना पाया मैंने अफरंगी का राज पानी पानी कर गई मुझको कलंदर की ये बात तू झुका जब गैर के आगे ना मन तेरा ना तन. What is the world of the mind? It is earning, intoxication, absorption and eagerness. What is the world of the body? It is profit and loss, artifice and intrigue. Once achieved, the richness of the mind abide. The richness of the body are like the shadows. They come and they pass away. There is no foreigner sway in the world of mind, nor any priest, sheikh or brahmans. Deeply was I humiliated by the Qalandar's remark, when you bow before others, neither the body nor the mind are yours. आसमानों पर मेरा फिक्र बुलंद, मैं ज़मीं पर ख्वारो ज़ारो दर्दमंद. कार दुनिया में रहा जाता हूँ, ठोकरें इस राह में खाता हूँ. क्यों मेरे बस का नहीं कार ज़मीं, आबलाए दुनिया है क्यों दानाए दीन. My thought scans the heavens, but I live on the earth in pain and degradation. I am a failure in the affairs of the world, always stumbling in its thorny path. Why can I not manage this earthly business? To this, Rumi replies, he who can stalk across the skies should not find it difficult to walk on earth. The proper cultivation and strengthening of individuality is equally necessary for the conquest of the two worlds. This is the implication of the Qalandar's remark in the verse quoted above from Bale Jibril. Iqbal refuses to believe that the world of matter alone constitutes the whole of reality, and that man should concern himself exclusively with his interests and problem. The goods of the mind and the richness of the spirit, which is always aspiring upward in man. Man's creativity is not confined to the reshaping of matter alone. He has also the capacity to build a much vaster world in the depths of his own inner being, wherein he discovers the source of infinite joy and inspiration in art and poetry, literature and science, philosophy and religion. In the pursuit of these cultural and spiritual values, he should make use of the physical world as his raw material and exploit its possibilities for strengthening the upward movement of the human spirit, the individual and the community. Iqbal has discussed this issue with keen insight in his second Masnavi, Ramooz-e-Bekhudi, The Mysteries of Selflessness, presentation of the intimacy of relationship between the individual and the cultural life of the community in which he lives, moves. Alone he is weak and powerless, his energies are scattered and his aims narrow, diffuse. The individual exists in relation to the community. Alone he is nothing. The wave exists in the river. Outside the river it is nothing. The individual gains significance through the community. The community achieves its organization through individuals. When the individual loses himself in the community, the drop striving for expansion becomes the ocean. The community inspires him with the desire for self-expression. The community makes its reckoning with his work. He speaks the language of his people and treads the path of his forefathers. Whoever does not drink at the zamzam of the community, the flames of music turn to ashes in his lute. By himself, the individual grows indifferent to his purposes. His powers are inclined to become dormant. The community invests him with self-discipline, making his movement rhythmic like the breeze. Having explained how the individual power and purpose take their inspiration and their characteristics color from the life of the community, either string yourself like a jewel in its chain or be wafted about aimlessly like the dust. The individual who loses himself in the community, that is in the service of its great and worthy ideals and purposes, reflects both the past and the future as in a mirror, so that he transcends mortality and enters into the life of Islam, which is infinite and everlasting. Iqbal condemns the new doctrines of fascism and Nazism with their ideology of race worship and hatred of other races. Against this gloomy background, it is refreshing to study Iqbal's point of view, which is really an expression of the political philosophy of Islam. Iqbal is strongly opposed to the ideas of race and color and to narrow nationalism and narrow patriotism because they obstruct the development of human beings. It is folly to pride oneself on heredity. The individual dies if the river of life goes dry. The nation dies if it lets go of the purpose of life. Iqbal, as we have seen, realizes the power of the past and is keenly aware of the value of history in the education and the general evolution of a people. Iqbal realizes that a community cannot gain a true understanding of its inner self without an intelligent study of its own history and historical evolution. What is history, O stranger, to thyself? A tale, a story, or a fable? No, it makes thee conscious of self, capable in action and efficient in quest. Sharpen thee like a dagger on the whetstone, and then strikes thee on the face of thy world. Behold the dormant flame in its fire. Behold tomorrow in the lap of its today. Its candle light the luck of the nation, making bright both tonight and yesterday's. Assimilate history and grow strong, drawing life from the breaths that are gone. When the texture of life has become weak and worn out, the community gains stability through imitation. Tread the path of thy father, it brings about unity. The individual is born of a handful of dust. The nation is born out of the heart of an inspired individual. The destruction of Baghdad in the 13th century, which brought general disintegration of the Muslim world in its wake. Chapter 5th, Creative Evolution. Equipped with a free personality and in active contact with his environment, man sets out on his career of unlimited development and conquest, which in its essence is the process of his education. The universe is perhaps still unfinished, that one can still hear the command, let there be. The universe, which is open, unfinished entity, constantly undergoing increase and extension, provides a stimulating field for a man's free and creative activity, through which on the one hand he conquers the world of nature and on the other hand brings to perfection the powers of his individuality. Thou created the night, I the lamp. Thou created the clay, I the vase. Thou created the jungle, mountains and deserts. I created beautiful gardens, orchards and flower plots. It is I who make glass out of stone. It is I who extract elixir out of poison. What is Iqbal's vision of the destiny of man? What is the role which he has to play on this stage? But he is by nature restless, inquisitive, engrossed in a ceaseless quest after fresh scopes for self-expression. In his innermost being, he is essentially a creative activity, shaping his own destiny and that of his universe, now by adjusting himself to it, now by pressing its forces into the service of his increasing purposes. In the process of active reconstruction and change, he became a co-worker with God. The teaching of the Quran, which believes in the possibility of improvement in the behavior of man and his control over natural forces, is neither optimism nor pessimism. Iqbal has a contagious faith in the unlimited possibilities of man's development. He visualizes him as destined to win his way through persistent efforts and struggles to the position of God's vice regency on earth and to achieve immortality. Iqbal is actually dissatisfied with men as they now are, inferior in caliber, limited in intellect, full of meanness and cruelty, and often raises his voice, fashion a new pattern, bring a more perfect Adam into existence. This making of playthings of clay, it is not worthy of God the Creator. हो नक्श अगर बातिल तकरार से क्या हासिल, क्या तुझको खुश आती है आदम की ये अर्ज़ानी? Iqbal has faith in his fellow beings and in the power of the right ideology and right education to transform them by developing their inner richness. उरूज आदम खाकी से अंजुम सहमे जाते हैं कि ये टूटा हुआ तारा मह कामिल न बन जाए. The stars tremble in their course over men's upward march, lest this fallen star should become the perfect moon. There are 100 worlds from star to star. Wherever intellect flies, it finds new skies. But when I looked deep into myself, lo, a boundless ocean was hidden within me. Chapter 6, Revolt against Intellectualism. In fact, intuition, as Bergson rightly says, is only a higher kind of intellect, through which we enter into and grasp the nature and meaning of reality as an indivisible whole. Do not seek guidance from the intellect, which has 1,000 wiles. Come to love which excels by the singleness of its purpose. खिरत से रहरो रोशन बसर है. खिरत क्या है? चिराग रह गुजर है. दरूने खाना हंगामे हैं क्या क्या, चराग रह गुजर को क्या खबर है. Intellect lights up the wayfarer's eyes. What is intellect? A lantern by the roadside. The storms and stresses that rage inside the house, what does the roadside lamp knows about them? He even goes further and argues that the conquest of nature through knowledge has a deeper significance still. For in reality, all search for knowledge is essentially an act of prayer. Like Goethe, Iqbal looks upon Satan as the embodiment of pure intellect, which in itself is of great value, but without the guiding hand of love may become an instrument of terrible destruction. इश्क नापैद व खिरत में गर्दिश सूरत माँ, अकल को ताबे फरमाने नज़र कर न सका. ढूंढने वाला सितारों की गुजरगाहों का अपने अफकार की दुनिया में सफ़र कर न सका. अपनी हिकमत के खमो पेच में उलझा ऐसा, आज तक फैसला नफ़ा व ज़रर कर न सका. जिसने सूरत की शुआओं को गिरफ्तार किया, जिंदगी की शबे तारीख सहर कर न सका. Love is non-existence and intellect bites him like a snake. He has failed to bring intellect under the sway of intuition. He has succeeded in tracing the course of the stars, but failed to pick his way in the domain of his own thought. He has got so entangled to the mazes of his knowledge that he is unable to judge between profit and loss. He has ensnared the rays of the sun, but failed to light the dark night of his life. इल्म से मेरी मुराद वो इल्म है जिसका दारो मदार हवास पर है. आम तौर पे मैंने इल्म का लफ्ज़ इन्हीं मायनों में इस्तेमाल किया है. इस इल्म से एक तबई क़ुव्वत हाथ आती है जिसको दीन के मातहत रहना चाहिए. अगर दीन के मातहत ना रहे तो महज शैतानियत है. East and West have both suffered in different ways. The West has bartered its soul in the process of conquering the world of matter. The East has developed a pseudo-mystical way of thinking, which made them content with their ignorance, their weakness, and their intellectual and political slavery. खुदी हो इल्म से मोहकम तो गैरत जिब्रील, अगर हो इससे मोहकम तो सूरे इसराफील. When the self is fortified by intellect, it is the envy of Gabriel. If it is fortified by love, it becomes the triumphant call of Israfil. Moment and love are mutually interdependent. What is impossible to us is possible for love. The capital of the intellect is apprehension and doubt. For love, faith and resolution are essential. Intellect builds that it may destroy. Love destroys that it may rehabilitate. Intellect says, live happy and content. Love says, learn submission and achieve freedom. The ego must continue to struggle until he is able to gather himself up and win his resurrection. Chapter 7. The Conception of Good Character. The good life must be a life of active effort and struggle, not one of withdrawal or stagnation. He lives his daily life in active contact with his environment and dynamically reshape it to suit his purpose. Iqbal tells to the people of India to strengthen their ego, abandon their dependence on others, and achieve a respected and self-respecting individuality. The good man must learn to apply his intelligence increasingly to the exploitation of the forces of nature. हर खाकी और नूरी पे हुकूमत है खिरत की, बाहर नहीं कुछ अक्ल खुदादाद की जद से. आलम है गुलाम उसके जलाल अज़ली का, एक दिल है कि हर लहज़ा उलझता है खिरत से. Iqbal gives a vivid description of this perfect individual who has identified his will with divine purpose. He subordinates everything to God, his seeing and not seeing, his eating and drinking and sleeping. With this high ideal before him, man sets out on the arduous course of self-affirmation, self-realization and self-development, lives a life of strenuous activity, and thereby evolves his inner strength and richness. The development of the inner resources of his individuality enables him to rise when he becomes the architect of his fate and a co-worker with God in his plan. Exalt thy ego so high that God himself will consult thee before determining thy destiny. There are three qualities which education should cultivate: courage, tolerance and faqr. Iqbal believes that the cultivation of an attitude of courage is essential for the proper education of character. Iqbal considers fear to be one of the most degrading of human emotions. Just as love strengthens the self, fear, which is the negation of love, weakens it and becomes the source of all kinds of corruption in the individual's character. Every other kind of fear undermines the joy of life, weakens the forces of action, and when inhibits altogether, it is the parent of all the vices, characters of the weak, deceit, meanness, cowardice, and flattery. Flattery, treachery, cunning, and spite are all nurtured in the bosom of fear. Every hidden evil nestling in your heart is the product of fear, if you will rightly regard. Courage can be cultivated as an attribute of character by making tawheed an active working principle of conduct which, according to Iqbal, implies a rejection of all fears except the fear of God, a surrender of our will and purposes to His increasing purpose, and an attitude of manly defiance toward all other powers which may threaten to arrest our free development and the exercise of our legitimate human rights. Let love burn away all fear, fear only God, and live like the lion. The fear of God is the beginning of faith, the fear of others is veiled adultery. Relieve yourselves of the fear of others. You are a power asleep, shake yourself awake. Locked in the prison house of fear that you are. Learn from the Prophet the precept, fear not. If you believe in God, free yourself from all fear and all apprehension of profit and loss. All fear except God inhibits action. Life becomes inhibited from self-expression. Whosoever has understood the teaching of Muhammad has seen idolatry lurking in the bosom of fear. It does not require any extraordinary imagination or insight to perceive that whole of our social life and our education are dominated by fear. The children in their earliest infancy are terrified at home by ignorant mothers and nurses and grow up timid and apprehensive, not only of authority but of imaginary ghosts and demons with whom they people every dark nook and corner of their home. At school, the sensitive growing child often passes through a reign of terror, afraid of his teachers and of the irrational public opinion of his fellow, who are generally impatient of the newness and originality and often impose all kinds of silly, unnecessary taboos on all individuals out of common run. They have been growing up with cramped natures, lacking initiatives, courage, and self reliance. It is love, in the sense in which Iqbal has used the word, which casts out fear and realizing the potential capacity for great deeds. जब इश्क सिखाता है आदाब खुद आ गई, खुलते हैं गुलामों पर असरार शहनशाही. दाराओ सिकंदर से वो मर्द फ़कीर ऊला, वो जिसकी फ़कीरी में बुए असदुल्लाई. आईन जवा मर्दा हक गोई व बेबाकी, अल्लाह के शेरों को आती नहीं रूबाई. When love teaches the ways of self-respect, the secrets of domination are revealed to the slaves. The faqir whose faqr savors of the faqr of Ali is superior to Darius and Alexander. Courage and truth are the attributes of the brave, for the lions of Allah are not subject to fear. The secret of a joyous life is to live dangerously. ए ताइल लाहूती, इस रिश्त से मौत अच्छी, जिस रिश्त से आती हो परवाज में कोताही. O high soaring bird, death is preferable to the livelihood which clips thy wing and arrests flight. The second quality which Iqbal considers to be an essential constituent of the good character is tolerance. Iqbal tolerance is born of strength, not of weakness. It is the tolerance of a man of strong faith. Religion is a constant yearning for perfection. It begins in reverence and ends in love. It is a sin to utter harsh words, for the believer and the unbeliever are alike children of God. Religion is a constant yearning for perfection. It begins in reverence and ends in love. It is a sin to utter harsh words, for the believer and the unbeliever are alike children of God.